Hello, and welcome to Finding Spiritual Resilience a year into COVID-19, part of Federation's Winter Wellness Series. I'm Beth Rosenberg. I'm board chair of the Menorah Park and a member of the Board of Trustees and Executive Committees at Federation. I'm also co-founder at Front Door Consulting. We provide professional development and coaching to a range of individuals and organizations to launch leader and teams to reach the next level. So before we begin our program, I would like to take a minute to thank and recognize Jewish Federation of Cleveland Board Chair David Heller and Federation President Erica Ruden-Luria for their incredible leadership during this unprecedented time. You have both navigated these uncharted waters with so much skill, and tonight's program is just another example of the creativity and purpose that you bring to our community. This evening, I am joined by two experts and spiritual leaders, Rabbi Binyamin Blau and Rabbi Melinda Mersack, in a conversation to learn how we can find spiritual resilience during this time of physical distancing, and to take away a few tools that will continue to provide us sustenance and strength. We will explore the definition of spiritual resilience and the concept of time, and how both may have transformed over the course of this year. We will also share other sources of support, both personally and communally. For me personally, as I look back over the last year, I can absolutely see what I gained and what I learned in this new mode we were in. And yet I remember so vividly points in time where this pandemic made me angry, scared, and just sad. I remember a few weeks after the lockdown started, I was on a Federation call with Michelle Hirsch and 4 other women friends discussing a Women in Philanthropy event we had spent months talking about. Michelle kicked off. I looked at everyone, tried to talk, and just started crying. And for those of you who know me, that's not necessarily my MO. I couldn't explain it. I remember I said, I don't know what's happening with me, but it just happened. But for me, having a group of people that felt safe, that were caring, that were empathetic, and in the same boat, in that moment, it was helpful, but also in that moment, it helped me think, I'm not alone. We'll figure it out together. And so to further support the insight and support us all, I would like to now introduce you to Rabbi Binyamin Blau and Rabbi Melinda Mersack. So Rabbi Binyamin Blau is presently the Rosh Yeshiva of Fuchs Mizrahi School and the rabbi at Green Road Synagogue. Since arriving in Cleveland, he has served as the Rosh Cholel of the Torah Zion Kollel and the high school principal at the Fuchs Mizrahi School. An educator of more than 30 years, he has taught in high school and post-high school settings in both Elizabeth, New Jersey, and Mevaseret, Israel. A 22nd generation rabbi, you heard me right. He served at the rabbi at Camp Hask and was part of the rabbinic team in Elizabeth as well. Rabbi Blau is a member of numerous rabbinic organizations and is the first vice president of the Rabbinical Council of America. He and his wonderful wife, Faith, are blessed with 4 amazing children. And Rabbi Melinda Mersack is the director of J-Hub, an initiative of the Jewish Federation of Cleveland and the Jewish Education Center of Cleveland that provides new ways for interfaith couples and families to comfortably explore Jewish culture and values. She is a Rabbis Without Borders Fellow of Klal and was a Brickner Fellow of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism. Rabbi Mersack is the current president of the Greater Cleveland Board of Rabbis. She is a recent graduate of the M2, or the Institute for Experiential Jewish Education, Senior Educators Cohort, and Relational Learning Circle. Rabbi Mersack earned a BA from Washington University in St. Louis and a Master of Hebrew Letters and ordination from the Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion. Each year, she attends summer camp as a visiting faculty. Throughout our program, please feel free to send any questions you have via the chat box, and we will absolutely make some time for questions and answers at the conclusion of the evening. So I think we're going to bring up the rabbis on the screen and we'll get started. I'll wait another another minute because I just want to confirm I'm not seeing Rabbis Mersack and Rabbi Blau.
Hi, Beth. They are on screen. Thank
They
you.
are. So for whatever reason, I cannot see them. Okay, good. In that case, let's get started. So I want to thank you for joining us this evening, to both of you. It's hard to believe that it has been a full year since the introduction of COVID-19, a year full of challenges and change, and a time where we continue to come together while still physically apart. Before jumping right into our topic, I wanted to take the opportunity to check in and hear from each of you. How are you? So first, Rabbi Mersack, if you could share some thoughts, please.
Sure. Thank you, Beth. It's a pleasure to be here with you and Rabbi Blau and all of those who have Zoomed in this evening. I'm happy to be here with all of you. I'm doing well, thankfully. I kind of tell people when asked that question, particularly if it's someone I haven't seen or spoken to in a while, I thank God I'm healthy. My family is healthy. I'm still employed. So everything else, is like, it's just on top of that. It's great. But there have been a couple of things that have really kind of helped me manage this past year that I'll share briefly with you. Which is one is really early on in this, a year ago now, the concept of Shemitah that we learn about in the Torah, the concept of a sabbatical for the land, has really resonated with me. And because Shemitah for the land allows the land to kind of like replenish itself so that we can continue to grow food and gain and nurture ourselves from the produce of the land. But that concept of Shemitah also extends to people. And, we know people that take a sabbatical from their work. And while, as I mentioned before, thankfully, I'm still working, but it looks different. So I've kind of shifted my mindset and have thought about this year as a sabbatical of sorts, that it's an opportunity to step back, to do things differently. We're forced to do things differently, but it's embracing that and allowing time to reflect on that and think about, okay, what does this mean? And how can we do the work differently? And how can we continue to connect with people? Just that shift of mindset has helped me be reflective and embrace it and embrace the uncertainty of it. Because a sabbatical can also be like a year's length. And so a year ago, it kind of helped prepare me for the unknown, like not knowing how long this whole time was going to last for us. And here we are a year later. And the other piece I just want to mention is that focusing on my blessings, focusing on the good things that I do have in my life right now has really supported me as well. So while this is my home office and I spend most of my days here, my husband mostly works from home and two of our children are upstairs in their home classrooms. And I love it. I have to admit that I love that I get to see my kids throughout the day, even though they're doing school and I'm doing work, but we get to see each other a little bit throughout the day. And I have 3 teenage boys. So in an average year, they probably wouldn't be spending much time with us, their parents, but we have dinner together most nights. And my oldest is a senior in high school and he's about to go off to college. So I am really kind of cherishing the time that I have right now with them and just kind of holding on to that and trying to live in the moment and appreciate those blessings.
Great. Thank you so much, Rabbi. And Rabbi Blau, you share a few thoughts.
Thank you, Beth. And thank you to my colleague and thank you to the Federation for inviting us and everyone who's joined us in this evening's discussion, which is so valuable. You mentioned, how am I? So again, I am, thank God, I am Baruch Hashem well. I am happy for the health of my family. I am happy to also be gainfully employed. Those are wonderful things. I do want to take a moment to mention that it's been a year of challenges and also I think of triumphs. And I think that's both true on a professional level and a personal level. If we're all honest and candid with each other, it's been a difficult year. It's been a very, very challenging year, particularly in our circumstances where as an Orthodox synagogue, the options of Zoom didn't really work for Shabbat and Yom Tov. So when we were no longer meeting regularly, we really weren't meeting. And so many of the aspects of our normal life, our normal religious life, were disrupted. And it was hard. It was incredibly, incredibly hard. And just the ability, I'm a people's person by nature, and I love that interaction, that I see someone in shul, that I go to their home for a visit, and you couldn't do so many of those things. And it was a number of months were quite difficult and challenging. And it took time to understand there are new opportunities and that's really what we want to focus on this evening. If a certain door is closed, well, another door opens, and there's always an opportunity to connect to people, and ultimately in the realm of spirituality, to connect to God. And that's what this year has been like. And while in the opening parts of the year, there were the frustrations, and now I think, well, thank God, we've managed. Our shul has remained vibrant. We're open. We're actually back in person based on strict guidelines with our medical professionals. And that balance between some of the things, I give a class every night on Zoom, a class I never would have given. And Zoom existed, by the way, before a year ago. We just all discovered it. But these concepts existed, but who would have dealt that? I would have said, come to the synagogue, come to the shul. And now I have a core group, even though we're back in shul, I still meet with them every night because we developed a bond. We developed a wonderful opportunity. And seeing those chances to do things that I wouldn't have done before that I now can do has been exhilarating. And there's a sense of accomplishment. There's still a sense of wistfulness. There are people I have not seen from the shul for such a long time. And that's painful. And I miss that. There are opportunities we look on a personal level, so many milestones that should have been celebrated a certain way and just weren't. But as my colleague pointed out, you develop other appreciations. I love spending time with my wife. No, I'm not at home enough. I'm actually in shul much of the time. Last year when I had all my children home, the bandwidth there's only so much bandwidth we had on the internet. So I actually even went back to the shul just so we could all function, have a little bit of space, thank God. But developing an appreciation for my family members who I spend more time with. And just one quick anecdote. As a synagogue rabbi, I'm in shul much of Shabbat. And in fact, after Mincha, we have Sudah Shlishit, I'm always in shul. And then for 7 weeks, there was no Shabbat service. So I was home. And I like being with my family. Don't worry, any Green Road Synagogue members, I am going back to shul. We're in shul. When we resume Sudah Shlishit, I will be there. Singing Zmira with my children was priceless. And so I think there are always going to be challenges in any situation. And what we're trying to work through tonight, it's finding the opportunities, and even to call them silver linings, the opportunities in the challenges to transform them while acknowledging them and owning them and validating them, but finding a way to transform them into things of triumph.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to jumping in because I see the balance you both talk about, and even in the challenge, we have to acknowledge how difficult things can be, and yet the possibilities, and it's different for everybody, but there's things that cross across everybody. So thank you. Well, how about if we start with our first question, and Rabbi Blau, will go to you first. But so can you share your definition of spiritual resilience and what that means to each of you?
Okay, so again, thank you. It's an excellent question. It goes to the heart of our discussion. For me, when we talk about spirituality, we're really talking about a connection to God, a connection to Hashem. And the ability to maintain that connection, even in difficult times, is the essence of spiritual resilience. As you all noted in our preamble, it's been a tough year. Beth, when you described that breaking out in tears, that was poignant. And I think many of us can identify with that when we have that moment like, oh my goodness, much of my family lives, much of my wife's family and my family lives in the East Coast. I think I've seen my parents in person for about an hour in the last 15 months. That never would happen before. We're a very close-knit family. But when you have those challenges, how do you find connection? And again, we talk about spirituality, but our emotional well-being is part of that process. If we're not in a good space emotionally, it's hard to find that connection. So for me, spiritual resilience is saying, okay, maybe I don't have the normal modes. Maybe I don't have the regular modalities of connecting, but how am I going to connect to God? And again, I have many members, even though we're back in shul and we are resumed in a very safe setting, many of my members are not back. Well, how are they connecting? How about those opportunities where some of us found when we do acts of chesed and we do acts of kindness, but they're often done in person. Well, you don't have that opportunity. So how do you find the means of doing that which enriches us, enriches our souls, even in times when the normal avenues are simply not available to us? But that is our challenge. We all believe strongly in the need to find that connection. So spiritual resilience means, even though I have hardship, even though my normal opportunities are not available to me, how will I maintain a connection? How will I find new vistas, new venues, new ways to still maintain a beautiful connection to our Creator?
Great, thank you. Rabbi Mersack.
So for me, a definition of spiritual resilience is it's what feeds my soul to help me cope with life's challenges. And for me, I find that through the study of Musar, which is a Jewish spiritual practice that guides us how to live ethical and meaningful lives. And through the cultivation of midot. Midot are soul traits that each of us has, and it's learning to find the right balance of these traits. It's essentially Judaism's form of self-help. So there was self-help in Judaism before self-help was a thing, or at least a popular thing in our American culture. But the study of Musar can help us be our best selves. And it does help us develop skills to cope with life's challenges that can support us and nourish our souls. And so for me, that's what I tend to draw on for spiritual resilience.
Great, thank you. As I listened to both of you and the theme, something sparked for me is that I think I had lost that connection and I was so busy and never stopped. And this year it is really true. I've cut back on who I'm seeing and what I'm doing, but those connections are important with my family and I think about it more. So thank you both. That was an eye-opener for me. Appreciate it. And a reminder, if you want to put questions in the chat, we will get to them. So to everybody. So let's go to our second question. And Rabbi Mersack, will ask you to go first. How have you typically found spirituality? And has that changed since COVID-19? And do you feel you seek it more now than before?
So for me, it actually builds upon what you just said, Beth, that for me, spirituality is felt in moments of presence, true presence, and mindfulness. And I mean, if you're familiar with Martin Buber's I thou concept, for me, that's a little bit, but presence it's really being in the moment and being open without judgment and without assumptions, without preconceived ideas to what the world and other people have to offer us. So really kind of being in those moments and connecting with nature, with creation, and with people. And for me, that's where I feel most spiritual, and that's how I experience God. For me, that's where the divine lives. Of course, and it's what we bring as people. It's that the potential for holiness that's within each of us because we are created in God's image. That's how I experience spirituality, the divine. And so it's during this period, during COVID, I think it's just being intentional about creating those spaces and being intentional about connecting with other people, even if it's through Zoom, intentional about going for a hike out in nature to give me that space and to kind of allow me to clear my mind and focus and be in the moment. And so even during COVID, when life looks different and we're not out and about in the world the way we typically are, I have to make time for it, I find. So because I can still get caught up in just like the daily tasks and the things that I have to do. So it's trying to be intentional about carving out that time and making space for those connections.
Great. Thank you so much. And Rabbi Blau, how have you typically found spirituality, and has that changed since COVID-19? Do you feel you seek it more now than before?
Wonderful question. And you're going to see a commonality to my answers, in the sense that it's always a question of trying to accomplish the same goal, but perhaps in a different format. So let me answer your question directly. I find spirituality in a multitude of venues. I find spirituality through the study of Torah and the teaching of Torah. I find it very often in prayer, although ideally, if I was more mindful, as was noted, perhaps I find it more frequently. I find it often through the performance of certain mitzvot, through doing chesed, so really doing charitable deeds, to interacting with people and helping other human beings. Each one is an opportunity, really, to feel that connection to God, to feel that spiritual, have my soul be fulfilled. And that's how and again, on a given day, that could happen, hopefully, hope it happens daily, but it happens at different occasions, and it'll strike you different ways. There are times when you have an opportunity to visit an older person in the hospital and really make their day, and you feel like, wow, this is amazing. That was an amazing experience. Sometimes you can walk through nature. There's so many ways to do that. So this year has been interesting because, as I noted earlier, some of those things couldn't happen. They couldn't happen in the normal way. For me, the power of prayer is very, very persuasive, but it's usually done in a context of the minyan, usually with a group together. And additionally, clearly in the beginning part of the year, that was absent. And I found a fascinating balance. On the one hand, not conforming to my normal schedule was a little disconcerting. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves when we talk about time, when I talk about the daily prayers, and I have to say a prayer corresponding to the day, and sometimes I'd realize, oh, is today Tuesday or Wednesday? I think I said the wrong prayer. They sort of all went together, and I would have liked the strength and power of my community being together. I missed that in the opening parts. Other times I felt, well, but I can really be focused now. And I didn't have to, a rabbi thinks about many other things. People joke, Rabbi, what do you pray for on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? And I do pray for many wonderful things for the world and for my congregation, but I sometimes say tongue in cheek, I just pray that the prayers go smoothly. There are a lot of things on your head. And when I was at home by myself, all of a sudden, there was a chance to really delve into prayer in a very different way. Again, I'm happier being back in shul. It's healthier for me. The routine is valuable. The power of community is valuable. The connections are valuable. But at the same time, there was something to those opportunities. And so I've looked for it more. I think sometimes I look for it more for comfort. It's been a crazy year. It's so many things. And I think none of us have mentioned it this evening, and I don't mean to all be morbid, we're looking for a little bit of energy. 500,000 people in this country died. That's just an unbelievable tragedy. And sometimes that's numbing and thinking, how did that happen? What does that mean? What are we supposed to take from that? So you look for more solace, you look for more comfort. And I definitely feel I've done that far more often this year out of necessity. Sometimes, again, as we all mentioned in our openings, there's that frustration. Why, we lost opportunities. So many things didn't happen that we'd have liked to happen, particularly with our children. All of us who are blessed with children, we know our children could have had opportunity X, and they're not going to have it. That wonderful year in camp, there's a certain point where you are in the camp hierarchy. It's supposed to happen after 10th grade, after 9th grade. There was no summer camp last year. So often when we have those challenges, and those are minor challenges, although to the many young women it weren't so minor, you find solace, you want consolation. And for me, that's looking to that connection, looking to God, looking to that sense of my soul being nourished, that I found so important this year and so helpful to get through some of the most difficult times.
What I so appreciate is as you talk about both in Judaism teachings and in with God, and also the idea that you can try to be mindful and planful, and that sometimes is easy and sometimes hard. And then those things can still happen, even if you can't get yourself focused, that being open, there's something, Rabbi Blau, about being open to that possibility and just experiencing things lets those things come out. So for both of you, that beautiful answers. Thank you so much. So as we move on, and you mentioned time, so to some, time has become almost amorphous with our days blending together. at times. And how has your perspective of time changed this year? And in what ways do you mark time? Rabbi Mersack, would you go first, please?
Sure. So I would say that I have realized all the more so how important Shabbat is. So I have already had my my own Shabbat practice and the rituals and customs that I do with my family. But all the more so now when the days do blend together, I feel Shabbat is that much more potent. It's that much more meaningful because it's grounding, right? So, I mean, Abraham Joshua Heschel called Shabbat a sanctuary in time, and it is. It's creating holiness. It's creating sanctity in what could otherwise be just a normal day. It could just blend in with the rest of the week if we allow it. But when we make a point to mark Shabbat and to sanctify the day and to do whatever ritual is meaningful for you to mark that day, that can be really, as I said before, it can be very, very grounding. It can be very nurturing. So I always encourage people to try something new. So if you don't yet light Shabbat candles regularly, try lighting Shabbat candles. If you already do that, maybe try baking challah, right? So many people are baking bread these days now that we're home. And baking challah itself can sort of be a meditative kind of practice. If you do that, if you don't already disconnect from your phone or electronics, try that. If, as we've talked before, connecting in nature is meaningful for you and that helps you connect to creation and the divine, then maybe take a Shabbat hike in one of our beautiful metro parks. But Shabbat has been very grounding for me. It has helped me mark time. And I have found for the people that I serve that through our work with J-Hub, we have really focused a lot on Shabbat in a variety of ways and helping people create their own Shabbat practices to help them sanctify time and mark time as well.
Great, thank you. Rabbi Blau.
So I want to echo that thought. Shabbat is the anchor, for sure. Definitely during our weeks, there's nothing quite like distinguishing Shabbat from the rest of the week. And again, I think putting away our phones, not checking our messages, I think for the first few Shabbatot, I felt that imaginary ping in my pocket, and I realized, no, it's Shabbat. There's nothing there. I don't have my phone on me. I'm not connected. I'm not dealing. And it was actually interesting and challenging because in the initial phases when we didn't know what was happening next and really not being even aware, was an opportunity to be reflective, opportunity to really take stock and really look at what are we dealing with. Shabbat is that for me always, all the more so. It was the one thing that was the constant that was clearly different than the rest of the week. Different in my practice, different in my religious observance, different in my mindset. So Shabbat has been key. In that sense, I'll expand it a little bit. I think all the holidays, all the Chagim are important checkpoints. They're always wonderful opportunities to be differentiate. Now again, maybe Purim this year wasn't quite like it was in the years past. Last year's Pesach Seder was not the same for so many people. So that was a challenge in its own right. But it was also an opportunity to mark time and make it distinct. What I have found this year is so often the individual weeks I can differentiate, but the larger sense of time seems to be lost. It's really a year. That's just mind-boggling. And all of a sudden taking a step back and thinking, oh, we're at this point in wherever we are as a family, as whatever development, and all of a sudden we realize, no. My wife and I were talking recently, we were talking about a trip that we took, and I realized that was about close to 2 years ago, but nothing has happened in between. So it feels like it was just a recent occurrence. And that's been hard, I think, for a lot of us. So I think from a spiritual perspective, from a religious perspective, Shabbat, we both agree, that really anchors you, really allows a time to recognize where we are. I think the Chagim are critical. We're between Purim and Pesach, right before Passover, and is another very important way. I know at the end of our discussion, we'll mention all the various, what we have fondly called the yoms, which is a wonderful blend of Hebrew and English, all the various days that we observe at this time of the year. And there'll also be an opportunities to say, okay, where are we in our lives? Where are we in the calendar? Let's take stock. We're going to deal with remembering the Holocaust. Yom HaZikaron, remembering the fallen in Israel, Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel's independence, Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem's reunification. Those are significant events historically. They speak to our religious lives, our national lives, and they're also wonderful opportunities to remember, what time is it? What does that mean to us?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, let's make a shift now and really think about some tools. You've both alluded to things you do, but both yourself, but what are some tools that you personally use or that you have seen work with others that we can incorporate to continue to provide us, both personally and even at the community level, with strength and support? Rabbi Blau, why don't you go first?
So I think the key, a lot of us have spoken this evening about connection to our family, connection to our friends, connection to our community, connection, of course, to God. And I think the key is trying to find those modes of connection and recognizing that there are opportunities. I'll give you a number of examples. I have paid Shiva visits to people I never would have visited because I'm doing it virtually. And I've connected to people, I've heard about it, and all of a sudden the whole nature of that visit is a different modality. But it's been so meaningful and so important. I've been able to connect to people in another country that under normal circumstances, it wouldn't have entered my mind to do so, but I've had that opportunity. I have found myself, I happen to be very fond of Jewish music. People may find other music nurturing for themselves spiritually. I listen to a lot more than I've ever done because it's something that just fills me up in a way that I couldn't previously. Call the people you love. Call them. I know it's old-fashioned. You can FaceTime them, you can text them, but there's something to that. I find myself talking to friends more now during COVID than any time I've in the past, because you value those connections. I will say, I've taken, as a rabbi, I've realized I need to study more Torah. Maybe now's the time I should gain, and I've taken upon myself new responsibilities, new personal, and it's very personal what I've chosen to study, but I found that's been so meaningful to me because there's so much other chaos in my life that's anchored me. There are wonderful, wonderful resources of so many classes online. We always knew about them. And yes, every rabbi wants the people to come into the congregation. I want you to come to the class. Well, you're not all coming to the class, and that's fine. Take advantage of those. Listen to them. I happen to be a proud alum of Yeshiva University. They have something called YU Torah. They have thousands upon thousands of classes of and that's just one resource. Avail yourself of those resources. Find the opportunities. They're out there. And again, what I find so fascinating is I hope we maintain a lot of these afterwards. People say, what will life be like? Will you go back to the same? Well, you want to learn from your experience. A lot of the things we did in the past were very meaningful and enriching to our souls, and we should, of course, go back to them. But that doesn't mean these other aspects that we've explored can't be valuable as well. So I really would advise people, take the time really to reflect. Think about what's going to work for you. Take the opportunity to connect, seize moments that you wouldn't have had. And I know a lot of them seem to focus on technology. It's not all technology based. There are other opportunities as well. But there are many wonderful means that you can find spiritual sustenance, deep religious conviction. Avail yourselves of them. Search for them. Search out someone who you think could be a guide, and that person can direct you. What do you think will work for you? I love when people ask me that question. I love the people who ask me, I have more time in my hands. Rabbi, what book would you recommend? That's a question that any of us would love to answer and try to find that tailored for that individual. There are opportunities. You have to take the time to reflect and be true, of course, to yourself. Everyone has to know what's going to be most meaningful for them. If you're not a person who likes listening to classes, I'm sending you in the wrong direction. Of course, find what works for you. But there are things out there, and I found this year to be incredibly enriching in that regard.
Great, thank you. Rabbi Mersack.
So I would echo in part what Rabbi Blau said, that I would encourage people to take the time to explore and reflect on what nourishes you and make a point to either ask for resources as he suggested. If you're connected with a rabbi or a member of a congregation, call your clergy, call the synagogue. You can contact Access Jewish Cleveland if you have more general questions or you need help getting connected somewhere. And then take time to carve out that time to devote to that, to spending a little bit of time every day. If you can only afford 10 minutes a day, then do 10 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be an hour. And for me, again, I go back to Musar and some of the midot, some of the soul traits that have resonated for me in particular over the past several months have been yira, which is cultivating awe, and hakarat hatov, which is gratitude. And these two, I think, are 100% interconnected. So cultivating awe, it makes me think of the phrase that we say in our morning liturgy, ma rabu ma'asecha. Like, how great are your works? How awesome, how amazing is creation, is the world, our people? And just like that phrase to me has kind of become a trigger to experience that awe, to be mindful of those blessings that we have in our lives and in the world. And then that leads to hakarat hatov, that leads to gratitude. And some people might find it meaningful or helpful to begin a gratitude practice. And maybe that's journaling at night and writing 3 things that you're grateful for, or sharing a practice with a friend who's kind of who makes you accountable for this practice. I know people that send texts at the end of the day to a friend, 3 things that they're grateful for, no explanation needed, just 3 things. And it just helps us get in that mindset again and be appreciative. And another midah that has really resonated with me recently is anava, which is humility. And the beauty of Musar in this practice, it's finding the right balance of these midot. So anava, humility, it's not just about how to be more humble, but it's about finding the right balance. So a Musar practice is finding a verse, a text, a phrase that helps you be mindful of the midah, helps you kind of focus on it throughout the day. And so a phrase around anava, around humility, that has been meaningful to me is no more than my place, no less than my space. And there's that balance again. So no more than my place. There are times when I need to practice tzimtzum, to like contract, pull back, and allow room for others, because I'm not the most important thing in the world. There are other things that are more important than me. There are things, something much greater than myself. And I need to take up space. I need to take up the right amount of space, right? That each of us has gifts, has wisdom, has skills to offer the world, and we should put ourselves forward and offer these things. So it's finding that right balance with anava, and which is also very similar to the teaching about carrying 2 pieces of paper in our pockets, right? The one that says, I am but dust and ashes, and the other that says, the world was created for my sake. So there might be times in our lives when we need a little more humility, and we need to remember we are but dust and ashes again. There are things that may be more important than me in this moment, and I need a little more humility. And then there are times when I need to pull out that other piece of paper and remind myself, particularly when we're experiencing such devastating challenges or tragedies or traumas, or we're depressed or lonely, or whatever these heavy emotions that can weigh us down and can lead us to self-doubt. We need to pull out that piece of paper that says the world was created for my sake, and we need to remember that. And I would say sometimes that's a very literal teaching. Literally, if it's meaningful for you, write that on 2 pieces of paper, put them in your pocket, particularly if you're struggling, so that you can remember while we are dust and ashes, the world was created just for you, just for me, just for each one of us. So some of these practices that we have in Judaism and particularly in Musar resonate for me. There's meditation, mindfulness. The last webinar was on mindfulness, so that practice. These are all things that can help us through and can help replenish ourselves and nurture us.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. Before we go to questions, first, I just want to thank you both. I think the beauty of what you both did is you made this so personal, and yet you also really provided ideas and options that really could spark something different for all of us. You know, we are all different, and the range of what you talked about was really wonderful and powerful. So thank you so much. And before we jump into questions, what I would like the audience to do, if you could use the chat, and it would be wonderful if you could share some of the things that you're doing to connect or find support. And so if you could, I'm going to take 30, I have a question already for the Rabbi, so please feel free to ask another question, but I'm going to take 20 seconds before we jump in to let you think about, you know, a few of the things that you're doing to connect or to find support. Silence is difficult, but we'll do it for a few seconds. So if you would share it in the chat. And in the meantime, I have a question for you. So technology has been a blessing and it has given us a way to connect. However, for those of us working in front of a computer most of the day, it can also be draining. I found that this has kept me from joining things like synagogue offerings on Zoom. Do you have any thoughts about how to reframe things like Zoom fatigue so we can be intentional about keeping a connection with our Judaism? I would ask everyone to raise their hands who has felt that. So Rabbi Mersack, if you have thoughts, if you want to go first.
Sure. So yeah, absolutely. We're all there, right? So there are definitely days when I do not move from this space. And I try to force myself to get up and take a break. And particularly now when it's been sunny weather, I will force myself to go outside and walk around the block, even if it's just like a short walk, but just to get up and get out, and just like a change of scene is really important, even if it's very short. The other thing I might suggest is make a date with a friend. So to go to a synagogue activity or event or service. So even though it might be on Zoom, you're logging in with your friend. You've made this date, which kind of makes you accountable for it. And a lot of times we just kind of need to push ourselves to do it. We just like need a little extra motivation. And once we're there, we sometimes find that, oh, this really is what I needed in the moment. And I was really exhausted and I didn't want to come, but wow, now I'm glad I did. And so just kind of making a date with a friend or a loved one that you're both going to do this at the same time can be helpful. One of my closest friends lives in Louisville, Kentucky, and we made a date to go for a walk together. So I had my earbuds in and my phone in my pocket, and she had hers in Kentucky and I'm here in Cleveland, and we took a walk together for a real nice time, and it was really lovely. So kind of having that partner can help.
Great, thank you. Rabbi Blau.
So Zoom fatigue, that is a real phenomenon. I think the days when we spend too much time on the screen, I think I would agree. Just getting up and taking a break. I had a conversation with one of my congregants this week, and he mentioned to me that in his business, they have mandated a commute. They're not commuting, they're all staying home. They mandated 10-minute commute. They even tell the people to go drive around the block, even to come back to your home, because it is unhealthy. And I think the person who asked that question, you're right. I definitely, as the cliche says, I can feel your pain. I feel your fatigue. It is hard. So I think one step, of course, is stepping out and taking a breather, physically stepping out, mentally stepping out before we re-engage. I think the other option is finding other modalities. You know, there are other ways. I neglected, I think, to mention some of the resources. I know that he passed this year. Rabbi Sachs wrote so many wonderful works. What a wonderful author. There are people, I know it's a little old fashioned, actually reading a book. It's a concept. You know, we actually read books other than just reading them on screens, but that's not a terrible thing to do. And then discussing it afterwards. A colleague of mine, a good friend of mine who has spoken for the Federation a number of times, Erica Brown, writes wonderful works. Both of them write works that are uplifting, that give you a chance to connect. I mentioned the idea of music earlier. I'll often, while doing my work, just have music on in the background that speaks to me. So you're right. I think that it's lovely. I can give you all the Zoom options in the world, but if you've been on your computer all day, that's the last thing you want to do is get on. So take a break, look for other ways to do it. And even if you're picking, be selective. Not every Zoom opportunity is the same. Is it an interactive situation, or are you going to be passive once again? They're very, very different. I find that it is tricky sometimes. We're doing a Zoom session tonight. I only can see 3 people on my screen, so it's hardly interactive in the classic sense. But if you find a smaller group, well, that's a different dynamic. And yes, it's still Zoom, so you can't do it right on the heels of doing everything else. But you'll find it's different. You can partner and study something that works, whether it's Musar, whether it's other aspects of Parsha, Torah. There's so many things. Even study a book that you've read together, talk about it. There are a lot of opportunities. But again, as we've said all night, own the reality. Just suggesting everyone go on Zoom is not pragmatic. It is not realistic. Look for other ways to do it. Take a break and find that which will work for you.
Great. We have another question, but I'm also going to share some of what we're seeing in the chat also. So things such as, you know, really focusing on leaning on your friends and family farthest away through FaceTime and Zoom. I love this being present. Imagine not looking at your screens and focusing for more than 4 minutes, you know, or putting it away and turning it off when it's not Shabbat. You know, volunteering at the temple. Group text with friends from high school that are funny and you're celebratory, singing Modeh Ani before getting out of bed, and just breathing. Lots of walks, weekly Musar classes, dance parties, phone bowl. I'm not even, the phone bowl, great way to disconnect and really spend time with family without distractions. Here's someone who said, I have Zoom fatigue for work, but I've fully embraced it for social connection. I don't feel Zoom fatigued when it is for nourishment. Really nice mindset shift. So that's lovely. So let me ask, and keep them coming. We still want to see them, but here's another question. How can we incorporate the pandemic into their Passover Seder? Rabbi Blau, well, I think it's your turn to go first. I'm going to
put my turn to go
one on your shoulders.
Well, I think it's look, part of the idea of the Passover of the Seder is reliving the experience and reliving the hardship. We talk about seeing ourselves as the 2 were slaves and going to freedom. From going to servitude to freedom, although it's the freedom to, of course, be in a servitude to God. And I think in many ways, it pays to look back and recreate in our own minds. What was this past year like? What have we gone through and where are we heading? And in their sense, in many ways, it's actually perfectly models what we've experienced. Let's look back. The part of the Pesach story is looking about our identity as a people. How did we become these people? What did we go through and where were we heading? And I think that we should do the same. Take the time. Again, you've heard the term mindfulness from us many, many times this evening. It is always the more we put in. Rav Soloveitchik once famously said, "Ein kedusha b'li achana." There's no sanctity without preparation. Think about it. Before you come to Pesach, before you come to the Seder night, think about, well, what has this year been like? What lessons have we learned, and where are we heading? And I think that a sense of optimism. We have a famous phrase that I mentioned this. I'm going to be such a rabbi and quote a sermon I gave this week. I apologize. That's a terrible rabbinic tradition. But we talk about this month, the month of Nisan that we just started, as being the month of Geulah, the month of redemption. And I said it should be the month of redemption in 2 ways. I hope it's a redemption from the pandemic. I hope we reach a point where we can do things differently. And of course, it's redemption in the classic sense, redemption that we long for. So I think there's a beautiful synergy, actually, between the actual Pesach experience and what we've gone through, and hopefully where we're heading.
Great, thank you. Rabbi Mersack.
One of the beautiful things about the Passover Seder is that it has been modified throughout the centuries, and we have continued to add to it. And so likewise today, we can maintain all of the customs and what has become the traditional components of our Seder, and we can also add some contemporary twists. So particularly with the plagues, right? I mean, many Haggadot, many of the Haggadah that we use for the Passover Seder, we'll talk about modern plagues, modern forms of oppression. And COVID certainly would fit there, right? So this is a type of modern plague that we're experiencing, being separated from loved ones, all of the ramifications that have happened because of this pandemic over the past year. So it is an opportunity to kind of acknowledge it during our Passover Seder, and it's as Rabbi Blau said, you're moving towards freedom. It's from oppression to freedom. So we can acknowledge these things, and some of these forms of oppression, COVID less so because we don't have as much control. But some of the other modern forms of oppression that we talk about, we also recognize it because it leads us to action. And then that can inspire hope for the future, hope for what's to come. But certainly because the Exodus story, our Passover story, does take us out of slavery, out of oppression, and into freedom and this time of revelation, out of the darkness comes light, out of the darkness comes hope.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And what a beautiful way to almost end. We're not totally over, but first there was a question. There are 50 screens strong here tonight. So we have 50 folks on the Zoom, which is a wonderful, wonderful group. And it's wonderful as we get ready for Passover to end on that question when we are so close. So I do want to thank both the rabbis, and then I do want to also share with the folks on the Zoom, talk about some other things that the Federation is offering in support, both events and also through Access Cleveland. So first, if you or someone you care about is having trouble coping, please call Access Jewish Cleveland to be connected to resources. These are free, they're confidential, and resources and referral services for the Jewish community. Also, we'd love for you to join us for these additional programs. So for parents with young children aged 8 and under, PJ Library invites you to the following 2 events. On Sunday, March 21st at 10 a.m., PJ Library Family Yoga, an opportunity for your family to strengthen your body and minds through child-friendly yoga. And on Monday, April 5th at 8 p.m., join us for Zikaron, the Salon, commemorate the Holocaust and hear a survivor story. On Tuesday, April 6th at 5 p.m. for Inside the Play, Whistle, My Mother Was Mengele's Secretary, presented by the Cleveland Israel Arts Connection. On Wednesday, April 7th at 7 p.m. for the 2021 annual Yom HaShoah Hagvura, Cleveland's commemoration of the Holocaust and heroism. And on Monday and Tuesday, April 12th and 13th, on your own time, join us for Ratzim Lezichram, Running in Their Memory. On Tuesday, April 13th at 7 p.m. for Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day commemoration. And please save the date to celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut on Thursday, April 15th. More details are to follow soon. I want to thank you all for joining us. We ask that you stay safe, stay healthy, stay connected, and we would like to wish everyone a very happy Passover. Thank you so much.